Welcome to Shortened Movies. Today I'm going to explain an adventure film called Into the Wild. Watch out, spoilers ahead. Into the Wild is inspired by a true story of an adventurer named Christopher McCandless. The film begins with Christopher's mother startled awake in the middle of the night, crying with the utmost grief. Her husband tries to comfort her. She was convinced that she heard Christopher calling out to her. Elsewhere, Christopher McCandless arrives at the base of a snowy mountain. He walks on by himself through the mountains. Along the path he stuck his hat through a tree branch to mark his way. He passes through a river and makes his way further into the forest. Eventually he finds an abandoned teal-colored bus. He investigates the interior and finds several things he could use. He makes preparations to clean out the bus. And now finally he finds himself truly free. Now he begins his life in the wild. Christopher spends his time hunting, riding, reveling in the beauty of nature, and experiencing joy from the freedom he had always desired. On a piece of wood, he carves out the words "no longer to be poisoned by civilization." He flees and walks alone upon the land to become lost in the wild. Alexander Supertramp, May 1992, months before his expedition, Christopher led an ordinary and stable life with his wealthy parents and her younger sister. The family attends Christopher's graduation. The event was solemn and ceremonious up until Christopher's name was called, and he ran up the stage and leapt forward to receive his diploma. As the ceremony continues, Christopher contemplates on his parents. He disagrees with the kind of life that his parents had led and the kind of difficulties they've put on them as children. Christopher's parents wait for him in a restaurant. Christopher and his sister Karina drive up to the parking lot, and the siblings take a moment to talk to each other. In the restaurant, Christopher's parents greet him fondly. His father then reprimands Karina for driving Christopher's car without a license. As their lunch goes on, Chris tells his parents that his grades are enough to get into Harvard Law, which they greatly approve of. His parents then remark that they would like to reward him by buying him a new car. Much to their surprise, Christopher was enraged. He emphasizes that his car was running fine, that he didn't need or want any material thing. Back in his apartment, Christopher begins to prepare for his journey. He withdrew his entire college fund and left a check to his sister with a note that says, "These are all my savings. Feed someone with it." He cut up all his IDs and credit cards. His sister describes Chris as a solitary individual with a rigorous and moderate attitude who found company in books by authors like Tolstoy, Jack London, and Thoreau. Chris drives on in his car along the freeway. He spent the night in the desert, willfully ignoring the sign that says flash flood area. In the night he was startled awake by water crashing into the hood of his car. The next morning, Chris burned all his money, removes the license plate from his car, and abandons it. He continues on foot for the next few days. Chris shacks up in a little tent and feeds off of wild berries. He passes through a town and uses a public bathroom to wash up. There he picks up a discarded lipstick and writes on the mirror, "Alexander Supertramp, July 1990, the new name he had given to himself. Alexander now travels mainly by hitchhiking and walking on foot. Meanwhile, his family starts to become restless as they begin to notice Alexander's disappearance. Throughout the film, his sister continues to provide insight into what kind of person Alex is. She noted that Alex was very clever, had excellent grades, especially those subjects concerning social problems and human life. After a month, Alex's parents decided to visit him in his apartment to check on him. But they found only the manager of the property saying that Alex had moved out 2 months ago. Alex's sister reports that what her brother was doing was an escape from a life that he found to be empty and meaningless. While Alex was walking, one day he finds a worn-out straw hat on the ground and puts it on his way to join a colorful van owned by a free-spirited old couple. The wife remarks on Alex's hat and invites him into the van. The man's name was Rainy and the woman was January. Later, the three share a meal by the campfire. The couple then inquires further about Alex and who he is and where he's from. When Jan asks, "Where are your parents?" Alex answers, "Living their life somewhere." Jan notices the contempt in his voice and asks him to be fair with his judgment towards his parents, as she observes that he seems like he was a love kid. To which Alex responds with Thoreau rather than love, then money, then faith, then fame, then fairness, give me truth. In the film, Alex's sister tells that as children she and her brother were subjected to witness their parents' violent arguments toward each other, all of which led to an attempted divorce which never happened. She then reports that the arguments and the unrest never stopped within their family and affected both of them greatly. On a beach, Rainy sits by a cluster of elevated rocks. Alex comes by with plenty of firewood that he'd collected. Rainy watches Jan from the distance, who was walking down along the shoreline. He tells Alex that they've been experiencing difficulties in their marriage. When asked whether he understood what he was trying to say, Rainey was surprised to hear Alex respond. Some people feel like they don't deserve love. They walk quietly into empty spaces trying to close the gap to the past. Alex then tells Rainey that he's been afraid of water his entire life. Alex runs off to join Jan and together they swim and jumped and dive into the waves. After some time, they run to Rainey, who was sitting by a campfire. That evening Alex takes notice that Rainey and Jan had reconciled. The following morning, the couple went out of the tent to find Alex gone, with the words "Thank you Jan" and Rainey written on the sand. In a pained voice Jan tells Rainey that Alex reminded her of her son. In the present time, Alex grows weary and hungry. In his teal-colored bus, animals are hard to come by and there are no plants to eat because it is winter time. He is rationing a bag of rice, which is his only remaining food. He tries his best to motivate himself and stay strong. Alex adds a notch to his belt, a sign of his increasing starvation. Months before his days in the bus, Alex began working on a farm with a cheerful and boisterous man named Wayne. Alex now spends most of his days working on the farm and spending time with Wayne and his friends. One night Wayne and Alex hang around in a bar. Alex wonders where he could get books about hunting and preserving meat. Wayne advises him to speak with his friend Kevin, who is an expert on hunting. Wayne then discovers that Alex intends to go to Alaska, to be, as he puts it, in the wild. Wayne becomes excited about this idea as well. Alex then explains how he doesn't understand why people are bad to each other. When Wayne asks which people Alex is referring to, Alex replies parents, hypocrites, politicians, pricks. Wayne then realizes how far Alex is taking his ideals and advises him not to get too deep into it. Alex's parents have started to be more active in their search. Alex, on the other hand, is still spending his days with Wayne, learning more about hunting from Kevin and working at the farm. That is until a group of policemen arrived and arrested Wayne. Before he is forced into the car, he looks towards Alex and tells him he can work for him anytime he wants. After he is out from jail, he advised him one last time not to head for Alaska during the winter. Alex continues on his journey and leaves the farm. Alex, now equipped with a small boat and a paddle, proceeds to travel by boat down a river. He stares at the flow of the rushing waters intently and pushes himself forward to accomplish the task. Despite his fear, he braves through the river and after successfully clears it, he continues down the river to find a young Danish couple dancing to the radio. They invite him over. The Danish man introduces himself as Mads, and the woman introduced herself as Sonia. Mads and Sonia were impressed that he had cleared the rapids. They exchanged stories and Mads informs him he could take his kayak straight towards Mexico. Their meeting was interrupted when Alex heard the siren of the river patrol that was after him. So he took his kayak and moved forward. He continued in his boat, moving through different places. He writes a letter to Wayne telling him of his life. Later on, Alex arrives in Mexico. In a few days he finds himself at the border being confronted by the police. Alex sneaks out and boards a moving train. Alex jumps off of the train around California. He walks through the city feeling lost. He enlists a locker to store his items in a shelter at night. He proceeds to walk through the streets of California, alone, feeling even more disenchanted by modern life. He looks through a bar window and sees a dignified man in a suit and sees what he could have been if he had chosen to live the life his parents wanted for him. This vision caused him to storm out of the shelter and take his things to go on the road once again. Days later he's on board another train. During the night the train stops and a man punches him in the face and pulls him out of the train car. He beats him and pins him to the ground. The man warns Alex never to illegally board his train again. In the present time, spring has sprung in Alaska and Alex is hunting, fishing, and eating enough. Once again, some days he goes hiking. He's managed to build himself a shower from a bucket punched with holes. He's become accustomed now to life in the wild. In one instance in Alaska, Alex had shot an elk. He rushes to his teal-colored bus, remembering Kevin's advice that game should be cleaned and cut off quickly before it rots. Alex tries his best to skin the elk and preserve the meat. After he was done, he washed his hands in the river and made an enclosure to store and cook the elk meat. Flies are everywhere and Alex struggles to keep the flies away in time. While cooking the meat, Alex reenacts a scene from when he was young. He and his dad were lighting a barbecue and eventually his parents ended up arguing and shouting at each other. The next day flies and maggots permeate the elk meat. Devastated, Alex screams in frustration as he sat sulking in his loss. He watched as a pack of wolves came and devoured the rotten scraps of meat. He then wrote in his journal, "Shut the moose, one of the greatest tragedies of my life." Jan lay down in their van with her dog Sony. Suddenly, little Cindy leapt up and rushed out the door. Jan followed and was quickly taken aback when she saw Alex's pack on her front door. Alex surprised Jan and gave her a hug. They were in Slab City, a place where people like Rainey and Jan gather to spend time together. Rainey, Jan and Alex attend the local performances. At the heart of the camp, a girl by the name of Tracy comes up on stage and sings with her guitar. Alex's gaze fixed intently on her, absolutely captivated, and Rainey and Jan took notice. The next day, Alex and Rainey are sitting down selling books in front of the van. Rainey tells Alex that his and Jan's relationship is doing well, which leads Rainey to mention to Alex that he should introduce himself to Tracy, who was across from them on another van playing the guitar. Tracy catches Alex looking and walks over to him. She asks if they're selling the books and they begin talking. Rainey stands up and walks away to give the two some privacy to talk. Tracy asks Alex if he wants to go see Salvation Mountain with her. Salvation Mountain is a hillside visionary environment created by a man named Leonard Knight. In the California desert, the artwork is made of adobe bricks, discarded tires and windows, automobile parts, and thousands of gallons of paint. Alex and Tracy meet Leonard himself and they showed him around each nook and crevice of his work, telling them about how it was made, how many people all over the world contributed to his materials, and that he feels loved by everyone, and he would like to love them back. The two of them spent most of the day with Leonard on his mountain. They returned to Slab City before dark. Tracy and Rainey prepare dinner while Alex and Jan sit by the van. Jan begins to tell Alex about his son Reno. When Reno was a teenager about to be a young adult, he left Jan and hasn't contacted her in 2 years. As Jan told all of this to Alex, she tries to make him understand what she was feeling and that it might be what Alex's parents are feeling. Now that he left, Jan asks Alex if his parents know where he is. One afternoon, Alex continues his calisthenics routine. He's doing sit-ups and Rainey is helping him. Tracy looks over and watches Alex. Rainey remarks that Tracy wants Alex intimately. Rainey talks about Alex's discussion with Jan about Reno. Rainey tells him children can sometimes be harsh when it comes to their parents and asks him if he plans on seeing his own parents. Alex responds that he is only focused on getting to Alaska and gets up and walks towards Tracy's van. In the van, Alex is surprised to see Tracy with only her underwear and top on. Tracy tells Alex that her parents aren't home. Alex rejects Tracy's advances and instead suggests that they play a song together at the local gathering that night. The next day, Alex leaves and says goodbye to Tracy and Rainey. Jan gives him a lift before they say goodbye. Jan gives Alex the hat she promised she'd make him. In the present time, in Alaska, after much reflection, Alex resolves himself to returning home. But as he walks into the clearing he had passed before, a strong river is now rushing through it. He sees Jan's hat from the distance, still lodged in the tree branch. He tries to pass through the river, but the current was too strong. A few weeks before his stay in Alaska, Alex meets Ron Franz, who is an old man who happened upon Alex and gave him a ride. Ron questions Alex about his lifestyle and his family. Ron invites Alex to his own. Ron is a veteran who fought in Okinawa. His wife and son died in a car accident and now lives on his own. Ron was a leather maker, and he started teaching Alex how to make all sorts of bags and belts made of leather. Soon Alex was able to make his own belt from the things Ron taught him. On a rocky hill in the desert, Alex and Ron discuss their views with each other. Again, Alex urges Ron to explore and take in new experiences, while Ron talks to Alex about God and urges him to forgive his parents. In Alaska, Alex becomes increasingly desperate from starvation. He punches another hole in the belt he made. Hungry and with no game to hunt, he turns to collecting roots and berries. One morning, Alex wakes in a state of pain and nausea. He stumbles towards his wild plant guidebook and found that he ate a lethal plant. He lay on his back and held in pain. He survived the poison, but it left him in a severely weakened state. The film cuts back to when Ron drove Alex on his way to Alaska. Before leaving, Ron makes an offer to adopt Alex. Alex asks Ron for them to talk about this when he gets back to Alaska. The film then shows us the people Christopher McCandless had touched in his life. We see Rainey and Jan Wayne being released from prison, Tracy on her prom night, and Christopher's parents dying and alone. Chris writes in his book, "Happiness is only real when shared." Near the time of his death, Christopher McCandless took a picture of himself waving while holding a written note which read, "I have had a happy life, and thank the Lord. Goodbye and may God bless all," written under his true and right name, Christopher Johnson McCandless. The exact date and time of his death are unknown. The film depicted Christopher in his dying moments, envisioning his parents, and running into their arms and smiling up to the sun as he takes his final breath. Subscribe the channel for more similar videos. Turn on the notifications. Leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.